Hi, I'm Mike Richter, and today we're going to explore what to do after you have a budget and a pre-approval amount from a lending institution. Now, this scenario is going to be based on the assumptions of MLS listings and you are being represented by a realtor. So, for an overview, we're going to talk about how much are you willing to spend, what kinds of properties are available in your target price range. We'll talk about, is what you want just barely outside of your price range, either on the top end or on the bottom end? And finally, we'll talk about, does this investment make sense as a rental property? So let's get started. First off, how much are you willing to spend? Now, just like any topic in investing and personal finance in general, this is a very personal decision. You have to determine what you're comfortable with spending. This will depend on your available funds as far as what a down payment you have available. This will also depend on performance in the market. In my market area, we have oil as a big factor in terms of housing prices and housing spikes. So if I'm foreseeing in the next 6 months or a year that oil prices are going to be up significantly and oil activity is going to be up, thereby increasing the amount of renters that are transient workers and house buyers that are earning substantial incomes from the oil field, I'm going to make a different set of decisions than I would if those conditions did not exist. Another thing to consider is your market a buyer's market, a seller's market, or a neutral market? Because your ability to negotiate deals will change very much depending on what kind of market it is. And if you're being represented by a realtor, hopefully they're going to be honest with you about what kind of market currently exists in your market area. And finally, once you've set a comfort level in terms of how much you're willing to spend, stick with it. Because if you've made a decision and you're comfortable with that, then you should not stray from it or should not let anybody try to push you to spend significantly more than what you've decided just because you've been approved for more. So what kind of properties are available in your area for your price range? Well, you want to write out a list of must-haves, so things like square footage, number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms are typically in the must-have kind of category. And you also want to list out a section of want-to-haves. So it'd be nice to have these kind of things, but they aren't necessary for your investment or for your owner-occupied real estate. Now, something important about this is if you're looking to turn a home into an investment, you want to make sure that you are setting a standard for yourself as far as what you, as an investor, want to put out in your name. So I employ something called the wife test. So every time I look at a real estate deal, I go ahead and have my wife take a look at it. If she's comfortable with living in the house, then I'm willing to pursue it. If she is not comfortable in living in the house, then I will not pursue it. And this gives me a good gauge of what I'm willing to accept and not accept in terms of a property. Now, a lot of the aesthetic elements of the property, I ask her to disregard simply because if there's enough meat in the deal, I can change those aesthetic elements to suit. But really, things that are really what she's considering is functionality of the house, feeling safe in the area, and whether or not she'd be comfortable with our children being in the backyard or in the front yard. Things like that. And I figure my wife's senses are really good, and she is really good about picking great properties. So I've grown to trust her instincts quite a bit in my real estate investing. Now, something to understand is perfect properties don't exist. Every property carries a price based on its condition and based on its location and what it has available to you. Now, properties that are fixed up and move-in ready typically will command more of a premium than properties that are in fair or poor condition. So you want to keep those kind of things in mind when it's coming to purchasing real estate. Are you willing to spend $10,000 more just because somebody slapped up a coat of paint on the walls? I'm not the kind of person who's willing to pay $10,000 for that, because I know that if I were to purchase a property in fair condition that just needs paint and touch up, I can get that work done for significantly less than $10,000. You also, once you have your list of must-haves and like-to-haves laid out, go ahead and perform a casual search on realtor.com or Trulia or Zillow or your real estate platform of choice and get an idea of what's available in your price range. Now, if you don't see anything that meets your must-haves in your price range, then chances are you may have unrealistic expectations about the amount of property you can get with your budget. And you may want to check out properties just above your price range. So speaking of checking out properties that are just outside your target range, I want to make sure that I emphasize one point above anything else in this video. And if you can draw one lesson from this video, it's going to be this. We as real estate investors seek to purchase property at a discount. We are not retail buyers. We will always seek a discount on the property. Ideally, a discount enough to cover the expenses that we would have to bear if we were forced to sell the property because an unforeseen emergency happened. We never want to be caught in a situation where we cannot sell the property or refinance it to cover our obligations, because we will not put our families and our livelihood at risk for these real estate investments. Once again, we always buy property at a discount. Even in sellers markets, we will always buy at a discount. So if I can't buy through MLS at a discount, then I simply will not buy in that economic environment. And I will seek other kinds of listings other than listings available in the MLS. So with that point in mind, if things are very tight in your price range, so that say you can only find 2 or 3 properties that fit your must-haves and have a couple of nice-to-haves, you may want to expand your search to just outside of your price range on the top end. Conversely, if you find a lot of things in your price range that meet your must-haves and some of your want-to-haves, you might want to take a look at what's available just outside your price range on the lower end. You might be able to pick up a really sweet deal on the lower end, purchase it, live in it for a year, rent it out after that, and be able to purchase another property a year from then, just because of a smart buy on the first purchase, or on that purchase in general. And if you can't get something to work in your price range or just below, what can you get just above? Once again, we are looking to purchase property at a discount. Now finally, now that you've looked at these different factors as far as must-haves, like-to-haves, and you found a handful of properties that you'd like to go see with a realtor, will they make sense as a rental? So something you need to do is your homework. When I was growing up in high school, I hated doing my homework. In fact, I would get most of my grades just from tests. I would figure out the concepts, get it done quickly, and take a test and enjoy my time playing video games. But in terms of real estate investments, you have to do your homework, because if you don't, you are gambling instead of investing. You are hoping that things are going to turn out well instead of managing your risk. Because you have so much control in real estate investing, as far as managing your risk, you may as well take advantage of that ability to control your risk by doing your homework up front. Now, what is your homework? Well, you want to take a look at the rental market in your area and see if in those areas that you see the houses that you want to look at, are there rentals available? And if they are, what are they renting for? Now, for the purposes of looking at the home as far as an investment vehicle, I would look at the rents around it and price your rental a little bit more conservatively. That way, if you get the conservative amount, you're okay because you've underwritten the deal based on a conservative amount. If you're able to get more than that conservative amount, then that's more money in your pocket, and that's even better. But the point of conservative underwriting is to protect you and your interests from risk. Now, there's a couple of rules of thumb that I like to use for real estate investing, and they may or may not apply in your specific area, but the rules of thumb are what I use to very quickly filter out properties so that I can know whether I'm wasting time or whether I'm using time well. The first rule of thumb is the 1% rule, and that's where I look at if a property is realistically able to get 1% of the purchase price in rent or more. More is always better, but as a minimum, I would like 1%. So if I'm buying a house that's with a purchase price of $100,000, note, I'm not saying worth $100,000 because we always buy at a discount. If my purchase price is $100,000, I would expect to earn $1,000 in rent. Pretty straightforward. If that house is not able to command $1,000 in rent, even at a discounted purchase price at $100,000, it's not what I would consider a cash flowing real estate deal. Now, we'll talk about appreciation plays in another video, but for the purposes of this video, we're talking about cash flowing real estate that you want to hold year over year, month over month, for gains in all the significant ways you can gain in real estate. Now, the second rule of thumb that I use is something called the 50% rule. This is where you look at all of your operating expenses, things like the property taxes, insurance, utilities if you're forced to cover them, vacancy, repairs, maintenance, and make ready, and property management fees. Those are the kind of things that I would consider operating expenses. So my assumption is operating expenses are going to be about 50% of my rent. That being said, the principal and interest portions of the loan I do not count as operating expenses because if I didn't have a loan in the first place, I wouldn't have to pay those expenses. So if I take my operating expenses from my rent, I've got 50% of my rent left over to handle my principal and interest payment of my mortgage, and the leftover is my cash flow. If, after considering all of that, I've got $100 or more in cash flow, I'm happy. So in an example of a $100,000 purchase price and $1,000 a month in rent, if I'm able to get $100 in cash flow, I'm happy. So what does that mean? What's 50% of $1,000? That's $500. Then that means my principal and interest portion of my loan can be up to $400 a month. So depending on your lending circumstances or your ability to get financing, that's going to impact what your final cash flow number is going to look like. Now, in areas where you've got higher than average property taxes, or that the expectation is the owner pays utilities, you may want to consider the 60% rule, where you assume that 60% of your rent is going to operating expenses and the remaining 40% is left over for your mortgage payment, and any leftover is your cash flow. So 2 rules of thumb there. The 1% rule, 1% of your purchase price is the rent, and the other rule of thumb, the 50% rule, or the 60% rule if your market situation dictates. So just a quick recap on the content of the video is, first off, how much are you willing to spend? Just because you were pre-approved for $200,000 doesn't mean you have to spend $200,000, for example. You may only be comfortable with spending $150,000 or $100,000. Next, once you've decided how much you're willing to spend, what kind of properties are available in that price range? And do they meet your must-haves and your want-to-haves or nice-to-haves? And next, if there isn't a whole lot in your price range, is there significantly more just above your price range that you can negotiate down for a discount? Or if there's plenty in your price range, is there something just below your price range that'll fit your needs so that you can more quickly acquire properties to further build your real estate investing empire? Those are things to take a look at. And finally, does the property make sense as a rental property? These are things that you have to know if you're purchasing with the intent to rent it out at a later time. And once again, the number one thing to know about real estate investing is that as investors, we always seek to purchase at a discount. We are not retail buyers. We purchase at a discount. So, if you found this to be valuable, I ask you to go ahead and provide a thumbs up to this video. If you'd like to see more on this and other topics, be sure to subscribe to the channel. And if you've got any questions, please leave them in the comment section below. And thank you so much for your time. I hope you have a fantastic day.